There she is.
She's back from the eclipse.
Does she have her beer? Do you have your moon beer?
Ritual begins.
All right. I've got coffee. So I've got the sun and I've got coffee. You've got the moon and beer. So like we're pretty set.
You got the bookends.
Yeah. Well, I had proposed of reading a poem that just came alive and to start us off before we really, or to help us sink into abundance. And this poem doesn't really say specifically anything about abundance, but it's just what came forward. So I'm going to trust into that. So this poem is called Singularity After Stephen Hawking, and it's by Marie Howe. Do you sometimes want to wake up to the singularity we once were? So compact, nobody needed a bed or food or money. Nobody hiding in the school bathroom or home alone, pulling open the drawer where the pills are kept. For every atom belonging to me, as good belongs to you. Remember? There was no nature, no them. No test to determine if the elephant grieves her calf or if the coral reefs feel pain. Trashed oceans don't speak English or Farsi or French. Would that we could wake up to what we were when we were ocean. And before that, to when sky was earth, and animal was energy, and rock was liquid, and stars were space, and space was not at all. Nothing. Before we came to believe humans were so important. Before this awful loneliness. Can molecules recall it? What once was? Before anything happened? No I, no we, no one, no was, no verb, no noun. Only a tiny, tiny dot brimming with is, 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 is. All, everything, home.
Shall I be the fool who breaks the sacred silence? There's really not much to say after that.
It's interesting because this eclipse is highlighting those themes of our connection with nature and how that's sometimes bringing in this feeling of disgust, shame, to be animalistic, to be an animal, to recognize that part of being human and always having that in the background, that primitive nature. So those were some things I was reflecting on while you were reading. The moon is representative of the environment within which everything takes place. This is where the plot of the story is. And the moon is exalted in the sign of Taurus, where it is right now. So it's nourished. It's receiving all of that it needs. So Taurus is represented by the bull and therefore also the cow. So there's like milk, but then also think about what a bull represents. It's like, our fighting nature and that erotic nature. So those things that we have to face about being human that they're hard to look at from the perspective of civilized life. All the eclipse references from Issa that are off camera because their light just shut off and then came back on.
We're just talking, Issa, before you arrived, how appropriate it is that you should not be here yet, saying that it's the moon eclipse and you are our moon. So
yeah. And I was genuinely late because I was doing the full moon ritual, Rebecca's ritual. So that's why I was like a bit late. So it all lines up
perfectly.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, two things come up to me. I mean, I wasn't hearing that poem. I was in a state where I wasn't really thinking too much, which is awesome. But the thing about the dot, like the little circle, that's interesting because that has been like a recurring theme, I think, for me in many ways. Like I remember like Kandinsky writing about like different geometries and what they mean, and saying how this dot is both the smallest expression of everything, yet at the same time is dimensionless. So it's this thing that is like both extremely small but also infinite if you zoom in, and how it's the start of all creation. Like he talks about like, like when you hammer something, or when you like that strike, that first strike that leads to like that impact that leads to other things, that's always like a dot. So that's one thing that stood up, and just funny. I mean, I don't know if it's funny, but I thought it was interesting thing that happened today is that because of this ritual, I was gathering like all the things I need. And one thing I needed was incense. And I don't really have any, so I ordered it. And the delivery people tell me it arrived. That like they literally sent me a picture of the box in front of my house. But I came here and it's not here. I don't know what happened. I can't find it. And I had this whole thing where like right before coming home, I stopped by the coffee shop where I bought the beer, my my moon beer, my ritual beer. And just out of the corner of my eye, I noticed, and I think I've noticed it before, but not every time I go there, that the lady of the shop has incense and sometimes she lights it in the store. And this one was like already off, but it was there, like the little ashes were there. So I had this idea of like, oh wait, I can maybe try to run to the store and see if the lady can give me like one incense stick, which is all I need. And that's exactly what happened. And it's funny because it really reminded me of this theme of today, which is abundance, in a sense that if you really look, or if you really reach out, the things that you need will always be there when you need them. And it just all kind of made a lot of sense to me, like how I've been cultivating this relationship with that specific coffee shop because I really like it. And today it all makes sense. Like, oh, okay, maybe this is why I needed to get close to the owner of this shop because I would need this eventually. So I don't know. That's the funny thing that happened today. And I don't know. That's what I was thinking today when we were thinking about abundance, about how scarcity to some extent is like this very, going back to what Sarah was saying, like it's this very animalistic view on things in terms of competition and having the things that you need to survive. But if you somehow go beyond that, or embrace that and then still push to towards something else, or maybe that's not the right way to phrase it. I don't know how to reconcile those things, but there is definitely a way to live that is not, I think, based on everything running out, on like time running out, on like, it's not like this race towards death. I think a lot of people think that way or feel that way. But there's those moments in your life that you realize that everything is a little bit like that circle, very small, but at the same time infinite. So yeah, I don't know. That's kind of where I am right now. It's a lot.
What jumps out at me from that is how relational abundance is. That we find abundance within our relationships.
100%.
Part of me wants to sort of push back a little on this notion of our animalistic nature kind of being a really competitive place. As I live and as I'm watching these cows graze and being with them, I don't sense scarcity in their bodies. I don't sense a sense of scarcity in the bird's body. And I was thinking about abundance last night, and what Isa was pointing to of fear of scarcity of time often being a really deep seed of fear. And then when Sarah was also speaking about shame and guilt, it was also really reflecting on the past couple of days what a world without shame and guilt would look like. So yeah, just dancing with this idea of abundance and time, in sinking into a sense of timelessness. There's no rush. I mean, that's kind of what happens for me. There's no rush. And at the same time, I'm also very thankful for a sense of death and mortality, because it does allow me to push. It gives me that push to create, or to maybe not even create, but to play my part.
I know the primatologist Frans de Waal, just on the primate level, also always speaks out against this whole notion that our animal nature is supposed to be competitive and wild and uncompassionate, and he tells stories of compassionate acts by other primates. Like, he's the one scientist, when I read him, I don't know if you know Frans de Waal. I highly recommend his books. He's the one scientist, when I read him, I actually cry, because he tells all these stories of, there's one that he tells about a female, I think a gorilla, I think it was a female gorilla, and she could have babies, but she couldn't feed them. There was something wrong with her milk glands, so she couldn't feed them, so her babies will always die because of hunger. And then he taught her, because he's a scientist, but he doesn't believe in weird experiments with animals, of course. He believes in observing them and interacting with them. He taught her how to use a bottle, so her babies could live. And then years later, he tells of, like, he went to visit the zoo or facility where she is, and she ran up to him with a little baby, and she just like showed him the little baby, because look, I can now have children because of what you, and my children can live because of what you have taught me. So she remembered. She remembered. So that idea that nature is cruel and competitive, and we as human beings are separate, and it's just our rational part that is not, it's not scientific.
No, I'm inclined to agree. That's why I think to some extent I was struggling finding the words, because some of it didn't feel entirely true. But I did wake up on a murdering rampage, killing all the mosquitoes in my room. So I'm also in that place where, like, sometimes you have to really be violent and kill things before they kill you.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's interesting. It's very archetypally rich, everything that everybody says. So for me, like, there's all kinds of gears shifting and stuff. When you say things like that, what you're saying, Isa, is a perfect representation of Uranus moon. It's like emotions. Like, this is okay. We're going in, like there's two, or there's many different ways to approach war. One is the sneak up, and we're holding space, and we're going to see what happens. But then the other one is to charge, because finally, like, it's broken. I need a whole, and what that does, particularly with this eclipse and this full moon, is opens up space for the new to come in. So in those destructive moments, that's when brand new can enter. So ultimately it is feminine when it's holding space for innovation.
I was thinking this morning, I went for a walk And Sarah, I listened to your talks on the eclipse, and I think a couple of times you mentioned that, but also during previous talks we had, like when there was an lunar eclipse, it would be like the sacrifice of the king. The king would have to be. So I kept thinking in my mind, the king is dead. Long live the king and the queen. And that is that space for something new then, because the full moon required a sacrifice of the old king.
I love it when sirens come in at interesting times like that.
The sirens are from Amsterdam.
I think this beer is from Amsterdam too.
Oh, cool.
I think that's exactly why I bought it.
Something I really want to highlight, and I don't know what it is, other than a sense of some sort of relationship between abundance and sacrifice, and the importance of sacrifice.
I wanted to mention that earlier, but I was afraid that it might not be, but since you mentioned it, I kept thinking of Jesus when we first got this theme, because he said the words, "I came so that you can have life and have it abundantly." And Holly, I shared with you the one time in collective journaling, we shortly after we drew this card, we were in a breakout room together, and I wrote on the cross and how that is oddly the ultimate symbol of abundant life. But that is the price of abundant life. The most beautiful, the most good, the most true human being who ever lived had to be sacrificed for abundant life.
And if I go to the etymology of sacrifice as something to make sacred, sacrifice is making something sacred or honoring what's sacred, honoring the sacred. I think about the sacrifice, of my ancestors, and I think about the sacrifice, which includes plants, the sacrifice of their being so that my body can live. Or maybe the plants live through my body. But in order for me to live, there's a lot of sacrifice that has to happen. Abundant sacrifice.
Yeah, I got all of my hair, nail clippings, coffee filters, and I put that in my compost for my sacrifice offering. I feel like compost would be a really great way to make sacrifices back. This is actually kind of on topic too, because I have had a fascination with our disposal of waste as humans for a very long time. And that's a part of our life cycle that we don't really account for as humans. There's landfills completely filled with waste that we could compost to make better soil. Like, it just seems like it would solve a lot of problems if it was more universal for people to compost food waste, to understand that there's also species of mushrooms that can decompose a lot of that waste. So it's just the case that not enough minds have been on this issue, because who wants to talk about garbage? But that's a human thing, and it's a part of us that gives that feeling of disgust. And so that's a part of us that we need to look at and not repress, not compress in, holes that we dig. So this goes back to another, conspiracy theory that I have about technology having existed in a previous time. Like maybe, well, I think all the garbage maybe got compressed back then. Of course, it's like, biomass, like trees and things like that. But who knows? There could be some other garbage from ancient ancestors that was compressed and made into natural gas. But anyway, I digress.
You're not. I don't know. I was gonna say you're not the only one interested in waste. Like I think I could write a whole thesis about this. I remember literally reading papers and stuff, and it was really interesting. Like this lady who's coming from a landscape architecture background, so they look a bit more into like culture and the form of things at the same time. And she was saying how even 200 something ish years ago, like there was not really such a thing as waste. Like people would use everything until the very end, and like you said, compost their own waste. And something in the process of separating like production from the home and putting it in like an industrial area where people lost the connection to how things are made, to the cost of making things, then that started getting like separated. But there is also a thing about, like you said, like hiding this. Like I always love, my favorite thing is to walk in like the dirtiest, ugliest, darkest back streets that no one wants to look at, because I'm like, these are the things that keep a city functioning. Like what would Chicago be without its back alleys? And at least they have planned back alleys. Like there's cities that don't even have that. And it's this whole thing about like the front, like what you show versus what actually allows the service to come in, allows the trash to come in, allows the workers to come in, allows the food deliveries to come in, the things that we don't want to see, that is actually, like part of the system that allows the final product we receive to even be possible. And it's interesting, like the separation between backstage and front stage, or yeah. So, and it's very linked, like you said, I think, to disgust and like not wanting to see our own disorder, or not wanting to see things that are like formless and chaotic. And like it's like this inability to see, I don't know, either potential or beauty in chaos and disorder as well. And I'm not sure why that happened. I think there's a bit of modernity there, like men thinking they can control and should control everything. but it's definitely a very interesting theme, for sure.
Y'all are speaking my language. I mean, out here, right? I mean, I mentioned this before. I don't use a toilet. It's like I go and I shit kind of close to my car. And it's like, well, that's gross. No. Like it's possible, because there are other creatures that use my shit in really beautiful ways. Like my shit nourishes other creatures, and the fact that I shit and then look at it, and then the beetles come and they love on it, and they roll it into new shapes, and then it helps them attract, their lovers. And it's like,
who needs roses? Who needs roses when you have shit? Come on, we've been doing it wrong.
Totally, and they're working so hard. Others are fighting for it, and I would miss that. Like I would miss that if I just flushed it away.
Oh, completely.
I mean, and so it invites me to a whole other world, like that we're in, what we're talking about, where we bury it. And my goodness, like if we, it certainly, thinking about landfills and stuff, I mean, really going off on a tangent here, but you know, it affects then what we consume. Again, I've mentioned like what I eat. I know the beetles then are taking in, and I can tell some days they really like it, and then other days they're less attracted to it. So it affects then me sometimes thinking about what I'm eating to feed the beetles. And then if you think about throwing away shit that's so hard for the earth to like for no other creatures to be able to use and to give them life. You know, you look at breakdowns of cruise ships and like, you know, bottles and anyways, I'm gonna stop there. It affects what I consume, I guess, is what I was.
100%. That's the other thing. I mean, this whole thing with waste, I'm sure we'll circle back to something. Like I'm not worried about the tangent because I'm sure it will lead to where we're supposed to go. But this whole thing, I think the moment it really struck me, I was in this class where they were talking about like sustainable smart building technologies, whatever, and they were talking about how in some countries they're installing like these vacuum like pipes that connect all the way to your apartment, so you don't even have to like put your trash in a bag and take it out to the trash bin. Like you can literally shove things into a pipe and completely forget about it, basically like flushing, right? But with actual food waste and other waste. And I was like, everyone was like, oh my god, this is so cool, and I was just like in like panicking. I was like, what do you mean I won't even know like if I made this much trash or this much trash? Like your reference about how much stuff you consume is completely out the window. Like your reference for like smelly trash in your house, you know, like there's something about, I don't know what you can learn from like shit or trash or whatever. Like it teaches you so much, and that being gone, that to me was like, oh no, this isn't it. Like this, like you said, hiding everything, like it's something unworthy, unholy, or whatever. That isn't it. That was like, I think the start of my my quest into understanding a lot of these things. But yeah,
I think the way to circle it back, it feels very natural. It's like this is a sign that we got the abundant life completely wrong, right?
Oof, yeah.
The moon is clapping for those who can't see.
The moon is clapping.
The sun likes that too.
As is the sun. Yeah. We see abundance and ease and comfort and luxury and consuming, but that's not it.
it's funny because I think this is another circle back to like that reductive view of like animal nature being this thing for competition, or not even competition, just like this thing of like needs that need to be met kind of thing. Because I remember reading this essay about this precisely. I think it was like in Ivan Illich essay, and I really like his stuff. But he was talking about that, how like city planners have started looking at housing as like a box that people need to live in. So it's like a number, you know, like we have X amount of people, we have X amount of houses to provide, and it's this complete disconnection from what living actually is. Like living is not having a box to live in. Living is the relations you have with the people who cohabit in a space with you, and your relation to a space. And that's not something that you can like dictate from a top down kind of thing. So he was talking about how institutions or whatever it is that we're doing right now have this thing of like reducing humans into a list of needs that is like a checklist of things that need to be met. And of course, when you think of that way, of course, you're going to think in scarcity terms, because you're thinking of like, oh, I have this need, so I need this amount of thing to supply that need. And I have this other thing, so I need like, you know, I the need for shelter, I need this many houses. I need for food, I need this much food. And of course there is no one's going to say like, oh, hunger is a myth. No, it doesn't. Of course, no one's going to say that, but there's something about framing it that way as something, some need that needs to be met and consumed, that entirely, I think, misses the point, or that doesn't see all this like web, like you said, like the relational thing about how we're so much more than these things, like how there's this infinite potential in a relationship for things to emerge and things to happen and to be provided for in ways that cannot be like, you know, reduced to some economic model or of anything. So yeah, it also, I think, weirdly enough, circles back to that idea of reducing humans to like a bunch of instincts and things, which I think is not true.
This thing came alive of like thinking about trash and hiding it, and then an image came alive of shame. So I was like, what is shame, you know? And how shame is sort of this burying. It's sort of this tying something up and putting it in a hole and not wanting to look at it. And sometimes, and the other thread that kind of was weaving through there was like, sometimes we have this shame of having needs, you know, like I'm ashamed that I need stuff. I'm ashamed that I need love, or that I need to be seen, or and so we trash it up and put it in a hole, and then it affects us, you know. It really just like the consumption stuff, it causes us, or it encourages us to live in a certain way. Yeah, there's not clarity there yet, but
I can see a sort of connection. I think maybe I'm misinterpreting, but it seems to me then that our misconception of what an abundant life is, and then an abundant life being this overconsumption of goods, comes from an inability to recognize our true needs. And shame, because as women, we've been taught that we are not supposed to need men, right? I feel ashamed of the fact that I need a man. And I have been very successful in hiding that need.
Yeah, I was thinking about the need, like the pattern that you get hooked on when the dopamine is the chemical that you're, you know, bringing about, and how that pattern is kind of what we're, you know, the abundance that we seek is that dopamine response that to be triggered. And so when that's the goal and no other experience is worthy, then anything different from that is going to feel like it's not bearable. I think when you get to a certain extent, when a pattern becomes so instilled, especially when it spirals into addiction, which is just a pattern that, a program that someone downloads, a virus. Oh.
It's funny because when you're talking about dopamine, like I envision like, like this big wave, like this big thing, this big hit, right? Like that's what dopamine does, I think. And I think again it goes back to this misconception of like abundance meaning a lot. I don't think abundance means a lot. I think abundance means a bit to what I said earlier, like exactly what you need when you need it. Like it's not a matter of quantity, it's not a measurable thing. Usually if you feel abundance, things feel infinite anyway, so it's not something you can quantify. But I guess this sort of thing is again me going back to I guess the society we have and things needing to be like dissectable and measurable. Like it's not a thing you can measure. And I think that's one of the reasons why it escapes this this whole thing that we have. But yeah, I don't think abundance means a lot.
I didn't even think of that possibility when I was quoting Jesus, like that it means a lot. It's, to me, it seems so obvious that it means a full life, a rich life, a meaningful life. That is an abundant life. But yeah, we have quantified everything indeed.
I was so resonating with your share about like having needs and feeling ashamed, especially of like having a man, or being in relationship with men, and being ashamed of that need. Yeah, it was interesting. I did one of Rebecca's rituals recently as well, and the thing that came alive in that was this message of it's your duty to love men. And there was like this kind of pushback a little bit, and it was like, what? That sounds so 1950s, right? So regressive, and yet there was an abundance there. There was actually like there was a lot of love. There was so much love in that message. I guess I'm really just right now, like my heart is really sinking into that deep sadness and grief around being ashamed of having those needs, being ashamed of speaking that, or being ashamed of wanting to be loved and touched and cared for.
It's interesting because I think of that as the exact reflection of men right now, that they actually do need that love and they're ashamed to even need it. Like the masculine within all of us really needs to be cared for right now. There's addiction, there's war, there's pandemic, and all of us are up in arms. Everybody wants to fight somebody because we feel insecure. And, I'm really fortunate to be in a position where I'm around my niece and nephew and my grandparents. And so what I can see is that both in my grandfather, embodying this masculine that had to get up and work every day of his life, he needs to keep moving. That's how he is masculine. Versus my nephew who lives in this world of chaos. Both of them need love. And that's what I think the feminine provides a space for that. So in order to teach love, or in order to spread love, you have to participate in it. So when you say the job of the woman is to love the man, to teach, well, like, or to experience that with each other, not even to teach it, but that's what we carry, is wisdom of how to nurture and how to care and how important that is. And now we know, because of, innovation in psychology and all those kinds of cognitive sciences and things like that, we actually understand how different humans can be with care and attention, and how it's actually detrimental for them to be deprived of that. So if we're not embracing our feminine, all of it, the raw, the dirty, the disgusting nature, that's the thing, is that we separated from nature, and then we started, like you're saying, measuring it all, naming it all, putting that intellect onto it. I need to understand this. So think about, like, I need to understand my mom, just from the child's perspective. What is she doing? How does she do all that? Mom, let me count those oranges. Like, kids will do this kind of stuff too. They want to understand the world logically. My niece keeps asking, what time is it? What time is it? I'm like, why do you care? You have nothing to be on time to. Why do you care about time? Stop asking. So they start to try to logically understand the world because they want to help mom. They want to support mom. And that's what men want to do. That's what the masculine wants to do within us. That's what so there's so many different levels you can think about these kinds of concepts. But I think that they're like all of the inner masculine, all of the outer masculine, every masculine everywhere needs to be cared for right now. And so that's where the feminine has power. And even if that's seduction, even if that's erotic, like so in some kind of way transcendent like that, that's all of those are ways in which the feminine can embrace the power, is by recognizing that that's where it is. It's in nurturing and it's in caring. It's in serving that motherly role, but it's also in the mystical and magnetic kind of connection.
I want to push back, but I have no idea. I'm pushing back because a thought came to me. I have no idea if I agree with the thought. So that being said, I sometimes wonder if what the masculine needs now is in fact care and nurture. Because the feminine is not only caring and nurturing. And I recently watched a talk Jonathan Pajot had with some father, some religious minister, and that it was about the masculine being in a bit of a difficulty now because of how the pendulum swung a little bit too much. And the father said, in order for women, which I think Nietzsche also wrote something like that, in order for women to become fully woman, a man must first become fully man. And then I had to think of Issa, I think it was our first recorded, I'm not sure, you talked about the man giving the signals when we're dancing. I feel like I can't be fully woman until, so I don't know what the man need to become a man. I don't know if it's more pampering, more mothering, because doesn't that keep him a boy?
That was why I was saying the seduction is also part of the feminine. You have Aphrodite and Athena. And right now, what we're working with with Taurus is Aphrodite and that seduction and that being okay, like being okay to seduce in order to exert your power. That's what we have. As women, we're seductive. The feminine concept, the feminine archetype is seductive. It seduces us. So I agree completely. I think that's exactly the difference in, I mean, recognizing the kids acquiring their masculine understanding of the world, separating even further from the womb. So as you get further and further out into the world and start to experience it for yourself, then you get desire pulling you towards things. Aphrodite is pulling you and attracting you. And then you move into an abundance of Aphrodite. And then maybe you go way too far beyond what, necessary. What's enough, or what's like satiating? What's like enough for you to enjoy, but you have to be the one now kind of asserting those boundaries. And so, playing with that, I think there's so many different faces of the masculine and the feminine. And that's our interaction with those is the reflection. It provides the reflection. So, I like that. Mm-hmm. I like bringing in the seductive feminine. And
I had a real in my stomach. I'm wondering what you all think of this, because when I go into my feeling of shame and around that longing, there's a sense of feeling unworthy of masculine love and protection and care. And there's a deep hunger to be cared for. There's a deep hunger for, like, I want someone to take care of me sometimes. And I feel shame for that.
I have like so many threads. I don't even know how I'm going to connect it. I'll say things and maybe something will happen. To bring Rebecca back again. I mean, like, we have this saying in my country, like when you're talking about someone, like their right ear starts itching, like it's probably her ear must be really itching right now because we're talking so much about her. But I did meet her yesterday. We're like building a ritual together. And it was precisely around the theme of like sacred. What is sacred? What is profane? Does that duality even exist? And of course, masculine and feminine also came up. But the one thing that was like of this very weird synchronicity, like she brought up Artemis, or I don't know how you pronounce it, the goddess, which is weird because I don't know much about Greek mythology or anything. But a few months back, I woke up and literally that word was in my head, like out of nowhere. And then I Googled it, and just that exact same day, there's like a NASA Artemis mission that's the first mission going to the moon for the first time in however many years. Like they ran tests that day, and it was like all over the news. So I was like, okay, this is a weird synchronicity. But anyway, so she was talking about how this goddess is considered one of the virgin goddesses, but she was saying that virgin, at least at that point, didn't necessarily mean, it didn't have any sexual connotation, but it had more this meaning of like a goddess who can be herself without a man or something like that. And that really made me think, as I was like, what does that even mean? Does that actually mean that like not like you said again, like this shame of not needing a man or whatever, or is it something else? And I'm still like kind of walking circles around that, because there's something about it that doesn't, I kind of agreeing with Holly and Liz, like it doesn't sit well with me entirely, this idea that there's shame around that or anything like that. So that's one thing that I was thinking. The other thing that I was thinking, when you brought up the thing about like what makes a man a man and what makes a woman a woman. I remember reading or watching this video about like these men's gathering and stuff, and they were talking about how only a man can make another man a man. Like there's something about like that peer recognition, that recognition from like someone higher up in some, and they were talking about like that's why it was so important to have like these hierarchical structures, like whether it was military or religious or whatever. Like you needed this idea of a mentor saying, okay, now you are a man in this whole like transition and rite of passage. And they were saying like and other men determine when a boy becomes a man, and then that man is ready to go deliver that manhood or whatever that is to a woman. Like that's how it is. And he was saying like that the maybe one of the current issues is that a lot of men don't know this, and they just try to like skip and go straight to the reward. Like they try to go straight for the woman, and they don't go through that process of becoming a man. And that was really interesting to me. But what that whole thing left me wondering was like, then what makes a woman a woman? Right? And I think, Liz, you just answered my question. So that was really interesting, because I've been thinking about that for months. I was like, okay, so if other men, if men make other men, then what makes a woman? Who gives us that? Is that a thing that is given, or is it something else? Yeah. And so that's one thing. Yeah, I'll leave it there for now, because there's a lot of things, but I think I'll go on too many tangents.
I just want to mention the same father that was talking to Jonathan Peugeot talked about he's starting a brotherhood, because he said that's what's missing, that this men meeting with only other men so that they can become men together. So that's interesting.
Yes, I didn't really quite pick up on what you were meaning by resonating with Lizelle's share about what makes a woman. I mean, I'm hearing initiation all over the place, like initiation, huge part of.
Yeah, but because I think, Liz, I mean, I don't remember exactly, but you were saying something about like, what is it like? How did you say it? But you said something about like, yeah, like men delivering this care to women is what makes you a woman, or something like that. I don't know what it was, but something about that. It was like, oh, maybe that's what it is.
A woman can only be fully woman in relation to a man who is truly man, something like that.
Well,
it was something like that.
I just want to like add in, because this might get you somewhere further, Issa, that the masculine gives where the feminine receives. So in that lineage of passing along like that idea of the masculine or the manhood, it just brought up for me that the feminine, like you're saying, like, well, what Lizelle's saying, like receives that, I guess, manhood after the man becomes a man. So yeah, I don't know if that brings anything up on the train of thought that you were going with on how does a woman become a woman, receive.
I think also that is very helpful indeed, but I think also the dance metaphor that you used previously, Isa, that we can, I can't salsa, but I'm a pretty good soki dancer. Soki is a South African dance. And in June this year, I was at a work function where there was a South African man. And it was amazing because for the first time in years, I could soki. And so we were dancing and twirling, and he was twirling me, because it's very much like, it's, I also twirl around, and he's just all stable and holding the space and moving together. And so typical Latin dance, except we do it South African style. And then there was another guy, a really sweet guy, but he asked me to show him how to dance, because he also wanted to dance with me like that. I told him I can't. I can't show you how to dance because the woman moves with the man. The man, every man dances a little bit different in Soki, at least. I don't know about the others. So the woman kind of completely takes a cue from the man. But he was like, no, I really want to dance with you. Please just show me. And he's so sweet. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna try to show this guy how to dance. And I took him in my arms, and I took one step, and I was horrified. It was really, it was a very intense emotion that overcame me, having this man that has no idea how to move in my arms. I was like petrified, like, what do I do with this man that doesn't know how to dance? And I think I mean that, of course, also symbolically. It's like I couldn't. I just left him and said, sorry, I really can't teach you how to dance. It's like, I just don't know how. And I think that's symbolic of I told him, ask this guy to teach you how to dance. He can show you. But and I think that's the problem. We referred earlier to boys wanting to go for the prize before they're a man. Like they want to dance with the woman without taking the time to learn the steps.
That's funny. After my fast, I had this like sentence that came blaring across my skull, which was or my heart, which is, you no more being with any uninitiated man. Like only initiated men can you invite to your body, you know, in like to be intimate with your body.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing that was coming alive, it was like no more uninitiated men, you know. Nice. Yeah, it was a beautiful lesson. And then the other thing that's coming up is I don't know if any of this will weave into abundance or not, but you know, women giving birth, right? It's like you're saying, like the receiving, but then there's also the giving, and that's where I've been just feeling really exhausted at times. I mean, I receive a lot. I don't want to come off as not being acknowledging that, but when it comes to this sort of longing for a man, there's a sense of wanting to receive.
It's different, if I may, because I think I feel you very much. I receive a lot as well, but I feel like I'm receiving from the mother, and I need to receive from the divine masculine as well. Or it's a different receiving. It's a different. So that's when you say, I feel like I receive a lot, so I don't want to complain. But the mother is really good to us. Yeah. We receive a lot from the mother. It's
I mean, what I'm thinking, and to try to link him back to shame and other stuff that we've been talking about earlier, is that, and I think this also came up in like one of our previous chats, like maybe the first one where we talked about the sun and stuff. But I don't know why. I think maybe some of that shame comes from this like Minsk, like not misunderstanding, but this weird notion that being receiving is passive, and then that being passive is like by default like I don't know, like less of a thing. Because first of all, I don't think there's anything passive about receiving, even if that's what it's perceived like just like you said, like if you're receiving the cues from the man when you dance, then there's nothing passive about that. Like you have to constantly be paying attention and updating, right? And letting your instinct come up and move with his movements. So there's nothing passive as in inert or dead, or there's nothing about that. But there is, I think, this weird conception that being receiving is passive, and hence it's like less of a thing so it's worthy of shame. And to link it back to to waste and stuff, I think there's also a bit of that as well. Like this, like trash just kind of piles up on its own, like it's this formless thing. It doesn't have intention, it doesn't have order, it doesn't have a goal really. It's just like the remnants of creation that just is just like this entropy thing. And yeah, there's something about that causes us shame, and I'm not entirely sure why. I don't have the words yet, but yeah, I guess I just wanted to bring it up that I see something that relating passiveness to receiving, and relating passive to being like wrong or less of, and that there's definitely nothing about that. If anything, there's so much agency in choosing a bit of surrender, right? And in choosing a bit of letting other things lead you, and staying aware and present in that letting go, versus choosing despair or choosing complete control. Like there's something really weird about like like agency by giving up some of your agency. It's a weird paradox, but there's something there, and I think receiving is a lot of that. Or at least that's what I'm tapping into.
Because it also takes wisdom to only receive initiated men. You have to really listen to your body and to the lady.
Yeah, whatever you open your mind to is what you open your body to. So wherever you're receiving insights or information, whatever programs or algorithms you're running on is going to determine what you are receiving. And in that way, you hold power by allowing space to hold what you find valuable. And like, that's the tricky part, is gauging where to place value, recognizing for yourself what you value, because it's got to come from the right place. It can't come from completely animalistic, can't come from complete lust, desire, ravaging, but it also can't come from that's not allowed. I have to repress that. That has to stay constrained, restricted. Like my environment can't be ascetic or ascetic. I don't think that's the word I'm looking for.
Aesthetic? Beautiful. You mean beautiful?
No, actually, I was looking for sterile, something that's like, it can't be that way. It can't be a sterile environment either. So we have to like balance both that wild side and that structure.
Now there's a song in my head. Take a walk on the wild side.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, there's been this like internal battle in me in this conversation, like some resistance and tightness, and I don't know, all of a sudden something's opening, and it feels really like such a warm sense of gratitude to just even name it and bring this to the light, sort of bring this shame or to bring this need to a group of really beautiful, caring women, and maybe men who are watching potentially, or and the inner masculine. But yeah, it's feels helpful just to bring it forward.
To name it, which is interesting. Mm-hmm. All right, because that's the Adam job. So like actually turning the lens back to it, or the eyeball back on it, and seeing it as something that maybe could use a little care, instead of repressing it and constricting it and keeping it pushed down. Yeah. Just observe it, hold space for it, watch it like it's there. Why are we going to deny it? Because if we deny it, it's just going to rear its ugly head and come back even worse with a vengeance, give it something to be angry about.
Plus, I feel it's really important that it's said by women, that we need men, but we need men to be men. So please, please, be men.
This is really interesting because I notice in myself that so much of my action in this world is led by a very quiet, beautiful kind of whisper. And so all the doing is actually a channel for something subtle and quiet to be heard and to manifest.
I think that's coming up for me is that I learned quite vividly recently that sometimes people who have a lot to give are just waiting for someone to ask them. Like I noticed this. I reached out to this person that I don't know, like we have a friend in common or something, for some like advice on something, and she replied in the most like beautiful way I could never even fathom. And it was like, part of me was like, I think part of her was waiting for someone to ask this so she could have the time and the reason to put all of herself together and provide this reply. And maybe in that same way, I think when you said like women need men to be men, I think men probably also need women to ask of them to be men. And that as well, I think, is a bit eroded. Yeah.
Because of our shame, because of our let's be strong and independent and hide the fact that we have needs. Maybe.
Well, because, that was really interesting because Daniel Schmactenberger was talking about the invention of the plow recently. I don't know what it was posted on, but maybe I can provide a link. But talking about the evolution of the plow and how it kind of put women out of business. That's not how he put it. But okay, so you think about it, like hunter-gatherers, the men used to go hunt, the women would gather. Maybe there was the occasional woman that would go on the hunt too. Who knows? Anyway, so
Ultimate.
but the roles were assigned for a particular reason, it's just kind of like, anyway. So the plow comes along, and used to be that women were the ones with the sticks digging holes. Well, then they, the plow takes its place, and in order to kind of set up the equipment onto the plow, you kind of need to be strong. So now men are providing all the calories because the vegetation and the meat is coming from men and what they're doing. So that was kind of when our role as women became caretaking and nurturing, which is actually something you do in the garden too, normally, and you're doing all of that caretaking and things like that. But because there isn't that prep work, which I'm like doing my garden right now, like I'm creating my garden right now. I'm digging up all the grass and stuff, and I've put my compost down that I've been collecting over the course of a year, and I put cardboard box down, and like I'm preparing the garden. But yeah, like, I mean, if I was in a relationship with a guy then I would have him doing that part of it, right? Like I wouldn't necessarily be doing like all the hard work if I didn't have to. And part of me like wants to have someone helping me, whether that's, you know, my sister helping me on it or something like that. Part of me likes to do this part by myself because I have endless time to do this. It's not like a deadline. I'm hoping maybe by spring I'll have a garden. But yeah, there's that, you know, I want to be the one taking care of the plants. That's where I'm ready to be at for my garden. I want this whole forest to be self-sustaining in that way for me to have all the nourishment that I need grown in my backyard. So, but there's a lot of preparatory work for that. And it's but you know, part of me also is thinking like that suffering and that process of going through all of that, it's connecting me with the earth. And so I'm connecting with my garden in that way. I sit out there and I just stare at my collards now, and I'm, you know, spending a lot of time. So yeah, anyway, those were just like reflections that came up for me about the evolution of the plow and like how our innovation and our way of evolving, our way of adapting is helping us to, well, it's moving us through the future with new technologies. And the fact that we have this consciousness that has the ability to observe that, then we, you know, have a little bit more agency in what it is that we pick to do. So yeah, anyway, there's a lot being provided for us with this abundance. There's a lot that we can get from having like systems that allow for there to be excess. So yeah, that's how, anyway, I should just leave it there because it's a full tangent. You know how these tunnels work.
I was thinking as you were speaking, coming back to what Holly said earlier about birthing, because I cut you off and you didn't really go further into that. And then when you were speaking, Sarah, I was thinking like maybe we lost as women our place of where do we suffer, where can we sacrifice, because we do have that desire to also sacrifice and suffer, but the men are carrying the heavy loads. So then we're like, oh wait, I'll carry the heavy load myself because I want to do, but that's not our strength is not in our bodies. That well, it is, but I mean not in the physical strength of carrying heavy loads. That's so maybe we're also confused about how can we contribute via suffering and sacrifice.
Yeah.
Say kind of the shadow of the divine feminine is shame, and I sense that's been a real it's a massive problem, right? Like I think a lot of men are breaking their backs and working their asses off and still getting a lot of shame. Like they're not getting that kind of encouragement and support. And let me get you some water. Let me take, you know, let me wipe the sweat off your brow. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm sensing that there's some deep hunger for men to be validated. They've been really shamed a lot in our culture. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. That was what I was sensing into with the duty. Like, it's my duty to love men. It's my, and that doesn't necessarily have to be physical. It's like praise and love and gratitude.
But the physical is fun too.
Oh yeah, the physical part.
Yeah, that's the payoff for us. Yeah. But the word endurance did come to mind when you said all of those things too. To endure in whatever way that arises, through pleasure, through pain, to observe and to watch and to, man, that's just so great. Like all of these experiences that I've had with the moon and well, particularly the moon lately, it's just a moment to be there, to see it.
Yeah, to hold it, to bear witness and hold space. Deep power in that, deep giving in that.
to pay attention, because I've been saying a lot of, it's been really on my mind how expensive attention is. And maybe that is our sacrifice.
Yeah.
Our suffering, to pay attention.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And that's okay. We got to kind of close up. But I mean, that's part of this meta crisis, right? Is that these social media platforms, that's what they mine for, is attention. And we don't realize how, like you're saying, incredibly precious, how valuable our attention is, right? Do I pay attention to the dung beetles, or do I pay attention to this stupid tweet or whatever? Affects us. That affects our immune system. That affects our thoughts. That affects our bodies. So I love that, paying attention.
I mean, I think, like, if I have something to close with, is that because we keep talking about how the woman's thing is to receive, and there's something about receiving. If you think of it as like receiving a gift, and I don't remember who said this, but it really struck me how about gifts have a sense of burden as well. And to properly receive a gift, you need to have an understanding that you're worthy of it. Like, if someone is giving this to you, is because they think you can handle it. Like if I give you this thing, it's because I think you will take care of it. So maybe there's a little bit of that, going back to the sense of like men sacrificing so much and you know, going to fight wars, going to fight things. They are the ones who are dying. Yeah, maybe we women have lost our way or our sense of how to feel worthy of receiving some of that sacrifice. And that's kind of where I want to end.
Yeah, beautiful. Like we started sort of with sacrifice and we're ending. So you were so, I don't want to impose, but I was really just feeling into your incredible gift of guided sort of meditation. And I don't know if that feels right for you to close us out maybe with a guided meditation. There's an invitation, and feel free to accept or reject as you feel called.
I'm not sure if you said Lizelle or Isa, because I heard both.
Oh, I was saying Lizelle, although Isa, yeah. Maybe you have a hidden gift.
I was looking at Isa. What you said.
Oh,
yeah, no, Lizelle,
I was watching both of them.
Lizelle, like,
and I know she's been working with Rebecca, so I imagine there's beautiful things growing there. So Isa, do you have something? Isa, do you have something, or shall I try? I thought of a ritual, but not. I don't think it's appropriate. So
No,
Isa,
you can go ahead. We're still like at the beginning phase of something coming up. I think I will share a lot when I have a more developed sense of how the ritual goes. But I think today you can go ahead.
Okay. Shall we do something similar to last time?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Okay. Okay, let's close our eyes. As we are in this space together, let's rise up in our mind and reach out our hands to each other. Grab the hand that is on your left side and grab the hand that is on your right side. Feel the warmth of these hands. Feel the love of these hands. Here together, united, we want to thank life for the abundant gift of friendship, of sisterhood. We want to thank love that we might know her through each other, that we might feel her flow through us to each other and to those outside who needs her most. We thank the Logos for his presence in our life, for the structure, the order, the light that he brings. And we thank the light that we may see each other, that we may see goodness, that we may see beauty, and that we may see truth. Holding on to each other's hands, I want to give everyone now the opportunity for a final contribution to our coven for today. We bring our offerings to each other and to the world in love.
It's okay to be tied up in knots, to not know, to resist, be lost. It's okay. You're always at home no matter where you are.
Yeah, I think those knots, if you care is the word that keeps coming up right now. If you pay attention, what they really show is how connected you are to everything. They really show the ties to everything else. And what I have right now for those knots is a deep feeling of like reverence, even. Like I'm dead grateful for those knots.
So for me, the knots seem to be those desires, and maybe untying them allows for space through those threads. And yeah, I think the most important thing is to see them and turn your attention to them and acknowledge them and allow them to be there and take action after you've observed.
Let's pay attention once again to the warmth of the hands in your hands. Feel once again the love in these hands. And then imagine how a home is growing between us. How we are homing ourselves and each other. By our interaction. Imagine this home growing beyond us, making space also for others. And when we part today, keep this warmth and keep this home within your hearts. And let it grow further. When I say amen, let's give each other's hands a tight squeeze in love and come back to these bodies and go out into the world. Be light to ourselves and to each other. Be love to ourselves and to each other. Amen.